The splendid Renaissance church of Santa Maria del Carmine was designed by Brunelleschi. In it, you can find the Brancacci Chapel, which now has a separate entrance. Masaccio was born in 1401 in Castel San Giovanni, now San Giovanni Valdarno. His first work is now in the Masaccio Museum in Reggello. There is no way to exaggerate his importance as a painter. He was doing for painting what Donatello was doing for sculpture. Some say that the Renaissance begins with Masaccio, but that gives short shrift to Giotto. In 1303, Giotto frescoed the Scrovegni Chapel in Padua and the Bardi Chapel in Santa Croce in Florence some 20 years later. Had plague not ravaged the land, painting would have likely evolved more quickly. Yet it was 100 years between Giotto and Masaccio. Bernard Berenson said that he was Giotto reborn, who resumed his work to the point where death stopped him. Yet Masaccio achieved a much more flexibility of pose than his illustrious predecessor. Masolino, or Little Thomas, hired Masaccio, or Ugly Thomas, as an assistant. When Masolino was called away to Hungary, Masaccio received the commission. Compare Masolino's Adam and Eve with that of Masaccio's. Masolino's is very graceful, yet hardly revolutionary, except for the unusual black background, perhaps indicating a very dark day for the first couple. The serpent in Catholic art is almost always depicted as female, which makes little sense to those who know the text. The expulsion from Eden is breathtaking. Eve is covering herself, demonstrating her newfound modesty, like the Capitoline Venus, one of several Venus pudica, modest Venuses, such as the Venus de Medici. Can you think of an earlier painting that betrays such emotion, such intensity of grief as this one? Adam is so ashamed that he covers his face, as if unable to face the world. He actually presses his thumb into his eye socket. Notice that the light comes from the same direction as the light coming through the chapel's window, as do the other frescoes. The tribute money was executed at a time when Florence was at war with Milan. The church had asked for an exemption from the first income tax, the castasso, which was now imposed to pay for the war. While basically constructed as a triptych, it is one of the first continuous narratives in art. Jesus is approached by the tax collector and gestures to Peter, eschewing his obvious anger, to go catch a fish. And look at those halos, which are no longer round, but organically merge with the figures. And those faces. Jesus is quite calm, as is St. John the Evangelist, but Peter is fuming. The figures are modeled and have weight. Look at the feet. Again, the light is coming through the same direction as the window in the chapel and casts remarkable shadows. Look at the shadows from the tax collector's feet. Is there any doubt that they carry his weight? The tax collector looks embarrassed and flails his arms in contrapposto. From that fish, Peter pulls out a coin. Peter pays the man the tax, which is impasto in Italian. He hands him the money directly over a post, creating this visual pun. And look at the contrapposto in the tax collector's legs. The overall scheme has not only linear, but atmospheric perspective, with the light losing its saturation in the background. The orthogonals lead straight to the face of Christ. And those faces sport an early form of sfumato, perfected by Masaccio's fellow Tuscan Leonardo a century later. The baptism of the neophyte shows Peter baptizing what was said to be 3,000 people. Here there are only a handful. You can see the transparent water, which is difficult to paint in fresco. And look at the standing neophyte, shivering. St. Peter preaching is mostly attributed to Masolino. The healing of the cripple and the raising of Tabitha was a team effort. Showing Gothic influences, the fine signori of a typical Tuscan city is all Masolino. Overall, it is depicted according to the strict rules of perspective and is thus regarded as Masaccio's contribution. In the raising of the son of Theophilus and St. Peter enthroned, St. Peter brings Theophilus' son back to life. The people erected a new church to him where he is enthroned. However, the true meaning of this fresco lies with the conflict between Florence and Milan. In front of Masaccio and Masolino, you can see a portrait of Alberti in the foreground and Brunelleschi to his right. Painted by Masaccio, Filippino composed the five bystanders on the left some 50 years later. St. Peter in prison, visited by St. Paul, again, was painted by Filippino Lippi. St. Peter is visible at a window with bars, with St. Paul visiting him. Soon thereafter, in St. Peter being freed from prison, Lippi shows a slumbering guard, affording St. Peter a miraculous rescue. St. Peter, healing the sick with his shadow, shows a man looking at three men, one who has been healed, one who has just been healed, and one awaiting to be healed. The physically challenged man in the front is brutally real and perhaps the first depicted in art. In the distribution of alms and death of Ananias, Christians, after selling their possessions, brought the proceeds to the apostles, who distributed the money appropriately. Only Ananias kept back for himself some of the proceeds and brought only a part of it and laid it at the apostles' feet. After being reprimanded by Peter, he fell to the ground and died. We can't see poor Ananias due to the restoration. He just keeps paying and paying. Lippi's disputation between Simon Magus and St. Peter is held in front of Nero, with the pagan idol lying at the latter's feet. On the left is Peter's crucifixion. He is hanging upside down because he refused to be crucified in the same way as Christ. The scene is filled with portraits. The youth with the beret on the extreme right is Filippino's self-portrait. The old man with a red hat in the group near St. Peter and Simon Magus is Antonio de Poliolo. The young man below the archway and looking towards the viewer is a portrait of Sandro Botticelli, Filippo's friend and teacher. Perhaps a posthumous portrait of Dante stands in for Simon Magus. The chapel has proven a pilgrimage site for all Renaissance artists. Michelangelo copied Masaccio's work in the chapel. It was also the site of an assault on Michelangelo by rival sculptor Pietro Torrigiano, who resented Michelangelo's critical remarks about his draftsmanship. According to Cellini, he punched the artist so severely that he crushed his nose like a biscuit. We must be grateful to the team of restorers, including chemists, physicists, architects, and restorers, for bringing out the absolute splendor of this chapel. New and newer technology allows us to discover the dynamics behind the deterioration of frescoes, still the most enduring method of painting. The opportunity to see these frescoes at eye level alone was worth the task. We wish the Brancacci Chapel well after nearly 500 years of its offering to artists and laymen alike. What is a fresco staccato?
Staccato?
Sì.
It means that the fresco has been
Removed.
removed from its wall. They usually use a kind of glue.
Gesso.
Yeah, gesso.
So who painted this?
Alessandro Lori in the 1570s.
1570.